Tell me about a time you missed a deadline. Introduction. This is a common behavioral interview question for software developers, backend developers, full-stack developers, senior developers, and team leads. Interviewers ask this question to understand. Check whether you take responsibility when timelines slip. Check how you communicate delays, how you handle pressure. Check how you manage scope and priorities. Check how you recover when a deadline is missed. Check how you prevent the same issue from happening again. Check whether you blame others or learn from the experience. This question is especially important for check Java developers, backend developers, Spring Boot developers, full stack developers, junior software developers, senior software developers, Agile teams. The best way to answer this question is by using the STAR method. STAR means S. Situation. Explain the background. T. Task. Explain your responsibility. A. Action. Explain what you personally did. R. Result. Explain the final outcome. A good interview answer usually spends 10% situation, 10% task, 60% action, 20% result. The most important part is the action section because interviewers want to understand how you communicated the missed deadline, reduced the impact, completed the work, and improved your planning process afterward. Question. Tell me about a time you missed a deadline. Example 1. Missing a deadline because of unclear requirements situation. In one sprint, I was assigned a customer profile update API. At first, the work looked straightforward. However, during implementation, I realized the requirement did not clearly define which fields could be updated by normal users and which fields were admin only. Task. I was responsible for implementing the API, but the unclear authorization rules caused the work to take longer than expected. Action. Once I realized the requirement was unclear, I communicated the risk to the product owner, QA, and Scrum Master. I explained that I could continue coding based on assumptions, but that could create rework or a security issue later. The unclear areas included editable fields, read-only fields, admin-only fields, validation messages, authorization rules, audit logging, error responses. I arranged a short clarification meeting with the product owner and QA. After the meeting, we updated the acceptance criteria and documented the final role-based behavior. Then I updated the backend implementation with admin role authorization, service layer permission checks, forbidden response for normal users, audit logging, tests for admin and non-admin users. Because of the clarification and rework, the story moved slightly past the original deadline. I communicated the new expected completion date and kept the team updated until it was finished. Result. The deadline was missed, but the feature was delivered correctly and securely. QA had clear test scenarios. I learned to clarify authorization and role-based requirements earlier, during refinement instead of waiting until implementation. Why this answer works. This answer is strong because it shows accountability, early communication, requirement clarification, security awareness, stakeholder alignment, process improvement. Example 2. Missing a deadline due to external dependency situation. In one project, our Spring Boot service depended on an API owned by another internal team. We expected their endpoint to be available in the QA environment during the sprint. However, the endpoint was delayed, which blocked our final integration testing. Task. I was responsible for completing our integration, but the external dependency caused us to miss the original testing deadline. Action. I first confirmed the actual status with the downstream team. Then I communicated clearly to our product owner, Scrum Master, and QA that development could continue, but end-to-end testing was blocked. I separated the work into blocked and unblocked items. Unblocked work included client implementation, request mapping, response mapping, timeout handling, error handling, unit testing, mock-based testing. Blocked work included real integration testing, QA end-to-end testing, downstream error response validation, final environment verification. To reduce the impact, I created mock responses based on the confirmed API contract. I also prepared integration tests in advance so we could run them quickly when the endpoint became available. I tracked the dependency daily and shared status updates with stakeholders. Result: we missed the original integration testing deadline, but development did not stop completely. When the downstream endpoint became available, we completed integration testing quickly. I learned to raise external dependencies as risks earlier and track environment readiness more explicitly. Why this answer works? This answer is good because it shows dependency management, clear delay communication, mitigation planning, cross-team coordination, realistic status updates, learning from timeline risk. Example 3. Missing a deadline because of hidden technical complexity situation. In one sprint, I estimated a report feature as a small task. At first, it looked like a simple API that would return report data to the front end. After development started, I discovered hidden complexity around business calculations, date filtering, time zone handling, data volume, and export behavior. Task: I had to explain that the original estimate was too optimistic and that the work would not be completed by the original deadline. Action: I took responsibility for the estimate. I explained to the product owner and Scrum Master that I had underestimated the complexity because I did not ask enough scenario-based questions during refinement. The hidden complexity included calculation rules, inclusive date range, business time zone, records near midnight, canceled records, large data volume, database query performance, export behavior, QA test data. I proposed splitting the feature into smaller stories. The first story would include cancel, backend calculation API, basic UI display, date range support, QA validation with sample data. The later story would include check, export functionality, advanced filters, additional formatting. I also communicated the revised timeline and helped update the sprint scope. Result: the original deadline was missed, but the team avoided rushing a complex feature. The first version was delivered with better quality. I improved my estimation process by asking more detailed questions during refinement for reporting and calculation-heavy features. Why this answer works? This answer is strong because it shows ownership of estimation mistake, hidden complexity analysis, scope adjustment, product owner communication, quality first decision, planning improvement. Example 4. Missing a deadline due to QA defects situation. In one project, I completed a backend API feature near the end of the sprint. I expected QA testing to be straightforward. However, QA found an edge case where the API failed when an optional field was missing. Task: I needed to fix the defect and explain why the story could not be accepted by the original deadline. Action: I first reproduced the issue locally, using QA's exact test data. I found that the service logic assumed the optional field would always be present. I acknowledged that I should have included that edge case in my original test coverage. Then, I communicated the issue to the product owner and Scrum Master. I explained what QA found, why the issue happened, what part of the API was affected, whether other flows were impacted, what fix was needed, what retesting was required. I fixed the null-safe handling and added regression tests for optional field present, optional field missing, invalid request, valid request, related validation behavior. Then I asked QA to retest the original scenario and related cases. Result: the story missed the original sprint deadline, but the defect was fixed before production. QA verified the fix successfully. I learned to include optional field and edge case testing earlier during development. Why this answer works? This answer is good because it shows check, defect ownership, check, QA collaboration, honest communication, check, regression testing, check, quality mindset, check, learning from missed test coverage. Example 5. Missing a deadline because of production support priority situation. In one sprint, I was working on a planned feature when a production issue was reported. The issue affected report totals used by business users. Because it had real user impact, the production issue became higher priority than my planned sprint work. Task. I needed to explain that my planned feature would miss its original deadline because I had to support the production issue first. Action. I communicated the priority conflict early to the product owner and Scrum Master. I explained. Q. What production issue was reported? Who was affected? Why it was higher priority? What planned work would be delayed? What timeline impact was expected? What support I needed from the team. I avoided overpromising that both the production issue and planned feature would be completed without impact. I proposed options. Prioritize production fix and move part of the feature to next sprint. Ask another developer to pick up part of the feature. Reduce the feature scope. Delay the planned feature until the production issue was resolved. I investigated the production issue, fixed the root cause, added regression tests, and supported QA verification. Result: the planned feature missed its original deadline, but the production issue was resolved. Stakeholders understood the trade-off because I communicated it early. The team later adjusted sprint capacity planning to account for urgent production support work. Why this answer works? This answer is strong because it shows: check, production ownership; check, priority management; check, stakeholder communication; check, realistic planning; check, no overpromising; check, business impact awareness. Example 6. Missing a deadline due to environment configuration issue situation. In one sprint, a feature was ready for QA testing, but the QA environment was missing a required configuration for an external service. The code had been deployed, but the feature failed during smoke testing. Task. I needed to resolve the environment issue and explain why QA testing would miss the original deadline. Action. I reviewed the logs and identified that a required environment variable was missing. I confirmed the configuration difference between local and QA environments. Then I communicated the status clearly. I explained. Code was developed and deployed. QA testing was blocked by environment configuration. Which configuration was missing? Who needed to update it? What QA should retest after the fix? I worked with DevOps to add the missing configuration. After that, I ran a smoke test and asked QA to retest. To prevent recurrence, I updated the deployment checklist to include required environment variables, external service URLs, feature flags, environment-specific configuration, smoke test steps, and rollback notes. Result: the QA testing deadline was missed, but the issue was resolved quickly. Testing resumed after the configuration was fixed. The updated checklist helped prevent similar environment-related delays in future deployments. Why this answer works? This answer is good because it shows talk, environment troubleshooting, clear status communication, DevOps collaboration, deployment checklist improvement, QA coordination, prevention of repeat issues. Example 7. Missing a deadline due to code review refactor situation. In one sprint, I completed a backend feature and submitted the pull request close to the deadline. During code review, a senior developer pointed out that the implementation worked but duplicated validation logic from another service. Task. I had to decide whether to rush the merge or take more time to refactor the code properly, even though it meant missing the deadline. Action. I reviewed the feedback and agreed that the concern was valid. I communicated to the product owner and Scrum Master that the feature worked functionally, but merging it as is would increase technical debt and future maintenance risk. I explained the risk. Curse, duplicate validation logic. Curse, inconsistent behavior later. Curse, harder future changes. Curse, more regression testing. Curse, higher defect risk. I proposed a focused refactor. The plan was: extract shared validation, keep service-specific rules separate, add unit tests, run regression tests, update the pull request description, ask for re-review. I completed the refactor and worked with the reviewer to confirm the final approach. Result: The story missed the original deadline, but the final implementation was cleaner and easier to maintain. The pull request was approved after the refactor. I learned to submit larger pull requests earlier in the sprint, so review feedback could be addressed without deadline pressure. Why this answer works. This answer is strong because it shows C. Quality over rushing. C. Code review maturity. C. Technical debt awareness. C. Stakeholder communication. C. Maintainability focus. C. Learning from timing issue. Example 8. Missing a deadline due to data migration validation situation. In one release, we planned to migrate customer records from an old data model to a new one. The migration script was ready, and the production migration had a planned deadline. During test migration, we found missing fields, duplicate records, and unclear status mappings. Task. I needed to explain that the migration deadline would be missed because the data needed business validation before production migration. Action. I gathered evidence from the test migration. I summarized total records processed, successful records, skipped records, duplicate records, missing required fields, unclear status mappings, records needing manual review. Then I explained the risk in business terms. If we migrated without validating the data, incorrect records could enter the new system and create business or support issues. I proposed a safer plan. Generate an error report. Review unclear records with business users. Confirm status mapping rules. Correct invalid records where possible. Rerun the test migration. Validate record counts. Proceed after sign-off. I communicated the revised timeline and kept stakeholders updated as the data was corrected. The migration deadline was missed, but the delay prevented bad data from entering production. The business team helped confirm the mapping rules. The final migration was completed safely with better confidence. Why this answer works. This answer is good because it shows data migration ownership, evidence-based communication, stakeholder alignment, data quality protection, responsible deadline management, risk reduction. Best short answer version. If you need a short interview answer, you can say, in one sprint, I estimated a report feature as a small task because it initially looked like a simple API and UI display. After development started, I discovered hidden complexity around calculation rules, date filtering, time zone handling, data volume, and export behavior. I took responsibility for the estimate and communicated the risk to the product owner and Scrum Master as soon as I understood the full scope. I explained that the original estimate was too optimistic because the feature required accurate business calculations and proper edge case handling. Instead of just saying it would be late, I proposed splitting the work. The first story would include the backend calculation API, basic UI display, date range support, and QA validation with sample data. Export functionality and advanced filters would move to a later story. As a result, the original deadline was missed, but the team avoided rushing a complex feature. The first version was delivered with better quality, and I improved my estimation process by asking more scenario-based questions during refinement. Common mistakes to avoid. 1. Blaming others. Bad answer. I missed the deadline because the product owner did not explain the requirement properly. Better answer. I should have clarified the requirement earlier. And once I noticed the ambiguity, I communicated the risk and helped align the team. 2. Waiting until the deadline passes. Bad answer. I told the team after I missed it. Better answer. I communicated the risk as soon as I realized the deadline was at risk. 3. Making excuses. Bad answer. There were too many problems, so it was not my fault. Better answer. I explained the cause, took ownership of my part, and proposed a recovery plan. 4. No recovery plan. Bad answer. I said it would take longer. Better answer. I gave options, revised the scope, and communicated a new completion plan. 5. No learning. Bad answer. It was completed later.
Better answer.
I changed my estimation and communication process to prevent the same issue from happening again. Best practices for answering this question. Check. Use the STAR method. Choose a manageable missed deadline example. Take responsibility. Avoid blaming others. Explain what caused the delay. Communicate early. Provide a recovery plan. Show how you reduced impact. Explain the final outcome. End with what you changed afterward. What interviewers are looking for. Interviewers want to see whether you can be honest about missed deadlines. Take responsibility. Communicate early. Manage pressure professionally. Recover from timeline issues. Protect quality instead of rushing. Learn from the situation. For senior roles, they also want to see expectation management, stakeholder communication, scope negotiation, risk management, estimation improvement, release judgment, ownership of outcomes. Strong words to use in your answer. You can use words like acknowledged, communicated early, took responsibility, reassessed, clarified, adjusted scope, proposed a recovery plan, prioritized, mitigated impact, updated stakeholders, improved estimation, prevented recurrence. Example: I took responsibility for the missed deadline, explained the cause early, proposed a recovery plan, adjusted the scope with the product owner, and improved my estimation checklist for future work. Good missed deadline topics you can use. Depending on your experience, you can talk about unclear requirements, external API dependency, hidden technical complexity, QA defects and retesting, production support priority, environment configuration issue, code review refactor, data migration validation, underestimated report feature, delayed integration testing, security review feedback, performance issue found late, missing test data, deployment approval delay, scope change during sprint. Final summary. Tell me about a time you missed a deadline is an important interview question because software projects do not always go exactly as planned. The best answer should include : what deadline was missed, why it was missed, what responsibility you took, when you communicated the risk, who you informed, what recovery plan you proposed, how you completed the work. Good examples include unclear requirement deadline slip, external dependency delay, hidden technical complexity, QA defect retesting, production issue priority, environment configuration issue, code review refactor, data migration validation. The strongest answers show honesty, accountability, early communication, recovery planning, quality ownership, and learning.